and especially for those of us who are, work with faith communities. I'm a member of the Franciscan Renewal Center um, veteran ministry. So why don't we get started here? Let me just, there was another thing. If, because of the short timing, we can't allow questions, verbal questions, but please put any questions you have in the chat room. And then Ashley, our wonderful facilitator here, will then read those questions for us as we get towards the end of this. So why don't we get started here? Okay, why don't we just, Ashley, if you could put up my slides. I think you've got them up there now, right? So, okay. So let's go to the next one, please. Okay, what are we going to talk about today? Well, one of the things I always want to start with is the challenges that veterans face, because I think it's great for faith communities to get a better understanding of this. Then I'm going to make a distinction between PTSD and moral injury, because the role of faith communities, particularly on the moral injury piece, is critical. And then I'll talk about information, studies, research on how spirituality can positively impact veteran wellness and healing. And then I'll talk a little bit about the role that faith communities can play, and then we'll get to the interview. So you can take the next slide, Ashley. Here's what veterans face, and there's more to it than this, but this is kind of a quick version. There's isolation and fear of large crowds. There's noise. Things just like going to a 4th of July celebration, can trigger things for veterans. There's an internal struggle. There's been loss of friends. There's been loss of identity for those who've been in the military for a while. Even when I got out, they said, "What are you doing?" I says, "I'm an unemployed Navy veteran." Well, that isn't kind of the identity that I wasn't, Lieutenant J.G. Mike Wold anymore with 100 people under me. I was this guy, out there. And so, at any rate, there was a disconnected feeling. It's hard to relate to others, and this is where faith communities play a big role. They form a family, they form a community, especially with veterans that are retiring here, getting out of the military. A lot of them get out in Arizona. They love it here. They get stationed here for a little bit, and all of a sudden, they're in our community. And then there's struggles with employment and education. I know it took me about 6 months. I really lucked out. We had a 12% unemployment rate when I got out in 1970, and I struggled with that because it gets to do with your identity plus the resources you need. There are also challenges in the family, and then there's physical and emotional challenges also. Next slide. Okay, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, the reason I use the word disorder is that's the definition that the VA has. Is it really a disorder? From what the experiences that the veterans have, any human being would have a similar reaction. It's physical, it's mental, but anyway, it's a psychiatric disorder, if you will. And the key thing with post-traumatic stress has to do with fear of death, because there's been a fear of injury or serious injury. Moral injury has been around for the last 10,000 years. Anybody who's had a situation that occurred that they did things that were against their moral code, against their, how they've been trained, how they've been brought up. So that leaves a wound. It leaves guilt and shame. Okay, Ashley. So I like this slide, this view. So this is those of you who are dealing with veterans informally, in families, whatever the case may be, might be instructive to know that moral injury and PTSD pretty much come together. They usually, the veterans will have both of these. But the PTSD, again, is more related to the trauma. So you're talking about startle reflex, memory loss, fear, flashbacks, anxiety, and avoidance. Moral injury, the key thing with that is grief, shame, guilt, alienation, loss of purpose. In the middle of it all, the symptoms that you'll notice are anger. My dad was a combat vet with the 32nd Infantry Division in Pacific, fought in New Guinea and in the Philippines. And he had we never knew what it was, but he would flare periodically. And he would calm down pretty quickly, but it was pretty scary. Then there's depression, anxiety, insomnia, and nightmares, self-medication. So those are the symptoms. Okay, Ashley. Here's what the studies have shown. Spirituality can actually improve post-traumatic outcomes. How can they do that? Healthy religious lifestyles tend to reduce behavioral risks, suicide and things like that. Expanded social support. Lessening of those feelings of isolation, because it's not just the veteran that's isolated. The veteran often draws the family into isolation. And that can be a real serious problem, but the faith communities can really help with that. It can enhance coping skills, improve psychological mechanisms, and finally, places the veteran amongst caring individuals. You heard from those who went to the first session, Sangu and you made a very strong point that healing, even for those who are trained in clinical healing, clinical disciplines, it has to do with love and compassion. And so that's where the action is at a really vibrant faith community. Next slide. So what can faith communities do? Why are we so interested in getting faith communities to work with us to serve veterans in partnership? Well, first of all, they're everywhere throughout the state. Secondly, there is a trust level that comes with faith communities. I experienced some of that myself, this idea of cynicism. In fact, I'm still pretty cynical about government, and some other things. But at any rate, faith communities a welcoming faith community can really draw veterans and their families in, because they're worried about their families too, and they want somebody to help them. Here's the thing, you don't need a real big veteran ministry. We have a really active one at Francisco Renewal Center, but you already have in place everything you need to help veterans. Some of your larger ones have counseling. You have support groups, you've got grief counseling groups, you've got all these different things going on, events. So you don't have to create a whole bunch of new things. You just have to have kind of a focal point. We call them a champion in the faith community. And the spiritual and the spiritual wounds, as we saw in the last slide, are really the domain of the in the service. It's the chaplains, and the faith in the civilian life, it's the faith communities, and also they provide a very supportive home. Next question. Oh, at this point, I wanted to. Well, maybe I'll ask this in a little bit. I think I'll wait till the end before I do the polls. Here's some ideas that we've learned from the. I started a big veteran ministry up in Minnesota, and what we found out is you get somebody to check in. Usually it's nice to be a veteran. Hey, I'd like to have a cup of coffee, whatever. It isn't about just a matter of camaraderie, basically, but sometimes the veteran will open up about what the issues are, maybe not. But at any rate, they know somebody cares. Welcoming them to the faith community, providing all kinds of things. We used to do mock job interviews. I had a CPA that would do mock interviews for anyone that wanted to get a job in the financial area. And there are other areas too, marketing and other areas. Providing support groups, giving veterans a chance to talk to one another. Counseling and spiritual direction. I know some of the churches have this. Conduct veteran recognition events. It's surprising. All it can just be is on Veterans Day, the pastor just says, hey, can we have our veterans please stand up? And, we don't need any, really, we didn't do this in order to get recognition, but it is kind of cool. You just feel a bit better. And you look around and, hey, I didn't know George and Mary, I didn't know they were veterans. Particularly Vietnam veterans kind of hid themselves, so nobody knew who they were. Veteran recognition, partnering with veteran organizations, and then just getting into the community, and then the Arizona Coalition for Military Families, getting people trained in the faith community so you can help the veterans. Next one. So just tell you a little bit about our faith-based initiative. There's over 600,000 veterans in Arizona, and if you look at family members, you're probably looking at probably 1.5 million, family members, and then probably another couple million people that care a lot about veterans. So that's we wanted to be able to engage our faith communities to help veterans. Next one. So what are we doing? We just want to raise awareness. This is what we're doing really today. We want to engage the faith communities, want to get them trained, in the Be Connected training, which you probably have already heard about. And it's a call to action. We have a committee. I'm co-chairing it with Thomas Winkle, and we're really making quite a bit of progress. Next one. I want to let you know, and I'll put a link in on this training, but it's combined Be Connected, which is, of course, training faith communities or anybody else at this who wants to know more about how they can serve veterans, resources, et cetera, and then trauma-informed care training. Those who are here in the morning session, we get a little more depth because we'll have more time during that training. So I'll put the link in on those. If also you can go into the Coalition website and just look under training, and you'll see those announced. Next one. That is the important number. Make sure you have that Be Connected number in your address book. I've called it a dozen times over the last year. You heard some stories this morning. I mean, there was a lady sleeping in her car. She called me up and, what are you up to? She was a veteran that I knew. I was sleeping in my car with my daughter. I said, oh, that's unacceptable. So we got a navigator to connect with her, get her housing, get things taken care of. So I believe that's the last slide. I'd like to have the polls just to see kind of who's here and a little bit about your faith communities, then we'll get into our interviews. So if you could fill those polls out, that would be great.
We have quite a few responses. I'll give it about 5 more seconds, and then I'll go ahead and share the results.
Okay. Did everybody get a chance to fill out the poll? Hopefully. So Ashley, do you the one that ends the polling, or do I have that? Can I do that?
I believe we both can, but I can do that for you if you like.
Okay, thank you. So let's take a look at our poll. Okay, well, we've got some clergy and chaplains here. Got people involved. A lot of you are other, which is great. That's the audience that we really want to hit. Because some of you may not be aware of some of the things that we've talked about. Does your faith community? Oh, look at this. 67% of you said that your faith communities are making a special effort. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Do you have a veterans ministry? Half of you do that responded to the poll. Very good. Those of you who don't, you don't really need a formal one, but at least have somebody in that faith community that's been to the training, faith-based training. Yeah, and look at all the areas, you know, you can just see where people can help. Okay. Well, I think next step, we probably can take down that last slide, and then we can, I'd like now to start with the interview, and I want to give a little bit of background on our interviewees here first. Okay, well, again, it's my pleasure to introduce Pastor Kate Adelman and her Vietnam veteran husband, Parker Adelman. You'll be amazed at what they're doing. Kate is the executive director and pastor of the Navajo Lutheran Mission in Rock Point, Arizona, way up in the northeast corner, right in the middle of the Navajo Nation. A lifelong musician, didn't even know that myself, spiritual director, conflict mediator, and Lutheran minister, Kate is currently focused on discerning the roots of divide in order to discover pathways of reconciliation among the Navajo people. Programs at Navajo Lutheran Mission create safe space and opportunity intended to form the intersection between diversity and unity. Committed to working towards what matters and what lasts, Kate participates alongside the Rock Point Veterans Organization, community and Navajo Nation leaders to erase invisibility, expose the gifts, and encourage the possibilities of fostered and possibilities fostered by committed relationship. They do amazing things up there. By the way, they're always looking for volunteers. So Kate, I'll put your email in there, if you don't mind. Parker Adelman, Vietnam veteran. Following military service, he trained as an architect and retired as a corporate architect for Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad after 30 years. You'll see how that fits in with his current mission. Parker is currently the facilities planner at Navajo Lutheran Mission, where he design skills and engineering expertise have benefited the mission to create a sustainable infrastructure and achieve large-scale projects, including restoration of campus buildings, design for medical facility, a new community food bank, and oversight of a clean water well, which is just being finished, I believe. Anxious to see how that all went. He's a member of the local Rock Point Veterans organization. Parker acts as a link of support that honor Rock Point veterans. And by the way, I believe that Parker is the only non-Navajo who's ever been invited to be a member of the veteran organization at Rock Point. So congratulations. So I want to ask a question first for Kate, then I'll ask it to Parker. Kate, what drew you to your mission at NLM? You had a lot of opportunities. You had a lot of areas. What drew you into that?
What drew me in was the realization that there was much happening in Rock Point. We've been going there for over 20 years now. There's much happening in Rock Point that the rest of the world doesn't know about, that people don't know that Navajo people are bright and wise, and they desire to maintain and sustain their native culture, and that they're basically totally ignored in the American culture at large. So being an advocate and being compassionate and seeing some of the challenges that they face, I was just moved to join in and to listen and learn from them, and then walk alongside them to accomplish the goals that they have.
Well, thank you, Kate. They're so fortunate to have you and the gifts that God gave you serving them. Parker, how about you? You know, what drew you to be so active? I mean, you wouldn't have to have been as active as you are.
Well, I think that occurred as a byproduct of being up there several times. I find that the Navajo people in general are not aggressive by nature. And the tremendous amount of participation in the United States military was actually kind of a byproduct, I'm sure, of the code talker involvement during World War II and their pride in that accomplishment. And so young people realize that in order to realize some successes in life, college or a university environment isn't necessarily their forte, but the military offers them the opportunity to learn a craft of some kind. And a good example of that is in our clinic on campus, we have a veteran Army nurse. And that person is now a nurse practitioner, or will be very shortly. And that person will run the clinic. So you realize that just that exposure in the military gave them the opportunity to expose themselves to the outside world, number one, and number two, give them the opportunity to flourish in a career path. And along with that goes, as has been defined, the PTSD. They're very sensitive people, and so they react, but they retain. They're not a person that's going to sit in a control group necessarily and volunteer their exposure to whatever created the PTSD. And so to gain their confidence, I think, is the biggest part, and especially to be an outsider. I always ask them, what gave me away is not being Navajo. It must be my blue eyes. And that sort of breaks the ice a little bit. And then we have the opportunity to talk independently of our experiences. And that, I think, has developed a relationship up there that has identified a non-Navajo person as someone that you can actually trust. And that's very important. And so, but going up there, I had to get old in order to understand there's a culture right here in the surrounding 48 series of cultures that we know nothing about. And the exposure and the learning where this body of people came from, and their struggles as they literally migrated into what is now the lower 48 states. It's phenomenal. And it's an amazing process, and that's really what has kept me involved.
Thank you so much, Parker. I was going to have a 1-hour lunch with Kate and Parker to learn about the Navajo Nation, and 3 hours later, and then several trips. It's a fascinating culture. It's a people they're very easy to love. Let's put it that way. It's a gentle group, quiet. At any rate, so I really encourage you to go up there. I put Kate's email in the chat too. So you kind of you talked about how you got connected with them. What are some of the things that you do up there? Kate, maybe you could start and then Parker could continue. I know it's a lot of things. So you have a school, you have other things. Maybe let us know what you're doing up there.
Well, the mission is a 5-acre campus with a K-2 school, a church, a food bank now, a water resource place, and a cultural learning center. So people, 350 volunteers a year come to the mission to help accomplish things for the Navajo people, but also just to learn culture and have the opportunity to eat a Navajo taco made by a real Navajo, and or maybe butcher a sheep, or do some of the more traditional cultural activities of the Navajo people. So we are in the middle of that all the time. And when that happens, what you realize is that the people care a great deal about each other. The Navajo people care about each other. and that they've all been damaged. Mike, I like your point about the moral code that has just been violated in them by outside culture, by outside expectation of them being assimilated into American culture, which would mean that they have to leave, their home, their understanding of their creator and the world in which they live. And so there's that just always present hurtful moral judgment that they feel coming from the outside. And then you add to that all of the challenges that veteran people have had in addition because of their experience. And so it's a culture that must overcome. They're resilient, they're positive, they're deeply faithful because they have to be. That's the only way they can survive as a nation of people.
Okay, thank you, Parker. Maybe you could tell us about some of the. I know that the well that you folks, I don't know if that's been completed yet. This whole idea about the Navajo Lutheran Mission being a center point really for that whole community. It isn't, and this is when I talk to faith communities, it's like it's more than your faith community, it's your community. That's who you're trying to serve, not just veterans that are coming to church, but veterans that are, say, in a homeless shelter, downtown Phoenix. So maybe Parker, you could talk a little bit about, some of those projects and the challenges that those projects have given you.
Well, the water well is when you realize that 60% of the bodies up there do not have running water. And so when you're talking about 200,000 people, you take 60%, they're without running water of any kind. And so their water is transported via the water blivet in the back of their pickup truck. And that is obtained through what we call up there windmill wells, which are shallow wells that were put down many, many years ago to support the people. However, those shallow wells are contaminated in this country, and that's a crying shame. So deep wells just don't exist. So the mission had a well, and so technically we asked to modify that well. And what our plan was to open that well back up because it was deep and clear water. So our well is 600 feet deep approximately. And we ran into an incredible vein of water. And our plan is to allow the people to come and fill their potable water blivets. And we're going to add a water bottle filler. And those are those water bottles that people have in little water chillers in their homes. That's all they have to drink. That's how so we're going to provide a water filler. And the next part of our plan is to provide block ice. For block ice as opposed to ice cubes, block ice will last quite a bit longer and it'll allow them to keep milk and eggs and whatever fresh longer when they don't have electronic refrigeration. And so that opportunity presented itself. Typically, the nation would not allow a private organization like us to have a well. It has to be a community well. And so we said, this is a community well. It just happens to be on the 5 acres of land that are leased to the mission. The second part of that is our food bank. The ability to have available food. Right now, when we get once a month food bank distribution, and we serve 200 families. And didn't even know that there were 200 families out there that didn't have access to good food on a regular basis. And the relationship that Kate and our new director, Patterson, have put together with the St. Mary's Food Bank, we remodeled a building up there so that we can receive the foodstuffs that the people will come and pick up on a regular basis. not just once a month. And that will serve our community and some of the surrounding communities. So those two projects alone have given us the outreach to access people that nobody has accessed before. Clean water and food are essential up there. Just think about it. In order to go to a grocery store, it's 40 miles. In order to go to a clinic, it's 40 miles. If we have a person that is hurt on campus, we put that person in our car and call the ambulance, and we meet in the middle of Highway 191 and make an exchange. So gas, and at $3 a gallon, these people don't have $3 a gallon, nor do they have a vehicle that can actually make some of those transportation runs. And so, those are the things that we had to realize were not being served in the community. And just to name three.
And another opportunity, Mike, has been through the coalition, because they offered to local veterans some assistance during this COVID time. And so we were the contact point, to say who those veterans are that needed that assistance. And so there were 10 or 12 veterans in Rock Point that received coalition support and encouragement during this time, and they are so incredibly grateful. But without the community relationship, the mission's relationship to the local veterans, that never would have happened.
Oh, thank you so much.
Tremendous outreach.
You can see why I love these two people. And just think of what they did. They go into a mission. It's been there for a long time, but it wasn't that connected really. And they used their relationship skills and everything else. It wasn't just about saying hello. It was, what are your needs? And that's what faith communities can do. What are your needs, and how can we serve them? So they have medical center. They've got they're distributing food. They are working with the veterans with recognition things and helping them. They're connected with the coalition. It's just amazing. But I did want to allow a little bit of time for questions if there are any there. So you can put any question. I'm sorry it's so short. It could be 3 hours, just like a first meeting with those two. But at any rate, what I did do, by the way, there's some training coming up that would be very useful for faith communities. And in May, it's a combination of Be Connected training and also trauma-informed care training. And so I put the links in there for you. But anyway, if there are any questions, put them into the chat, and then Ashley, maybe you could go through those in the order requested. Now, in case we run out of time, I want to thank my friends Kate and Pastor Adelman for the wonderful information that's provided and the good work they're doing. And thank you, those on the call, on the Zoom, for joining us. Ashley?
So we have a couple questions so far. The first one is, what kinds of needs to the veterans are there? What kinds of needs for the veterans?
Housing would be one of them. Several of the veterans, the local veterans, don't have the best access to services that are available to veterans in Arizona. So it's communication and advocacy, much of which is happening through Be Connected. But they need help. They need that sort of navigator person. Some of them don't have electricity. Some of them need a ramp built, a handicap ramp built on their house. There are all kinds of big and small needs, but mostly the need rises out of historical neglect for them. And so recognizing, discovering what the challenges are, and then helping them to overcome them.
Navajos are veterans, have similar problems to anybody that's trying to sign up for care services through the VA system. and an organization that can help them go through the red tape that it takes just to become served by the Veterans Administration. That alone would support many, especially young veterans. And now the old ones, some of them have found their way, but it's still difficult. It's still a lot of forms. It's a lot of waiting. It's a lot of red tape. And someone who can help them navigate that is incredibly valuable up there.
No.
Great. And another question we have from Pam Baldwin is, how can volunteers help?
Well, volunteers are engaged at the mission all the time, except during COVID restrictions. And so this whole last year, the mission has been closed to visitors. We've accommodated all the local needs, and our staff has remained safe by just drilling down to the basics that we could do best for the community. So, for example, we did a drive-in event to celebrate local veterans on Veterans Day. And so they came they pulled into our campus, they lined up like they were going to an outdoor movie theater. We broadcast a program on 107.9, our little low power local station. And we gave them a great meal, and we did as much as we could for them, just by being as safe as we could. But volunteers would normally come and do that kind of thing. They would be involved in the Veterans Day events. They'd be involved at our school or our Hojo Cafe lunch program. There are lots of different programs that the mission provides to the community, and visitors can do that. We have a group from California that comes to vaccinate sheep and goats. So there's just lots of opportunities.
Well, I just wanted to break in just for a second. I want to mention we're going to email out resources with links that can really be helpful to faith communities. Things from like Crew Military Missions Network, American Bible Society. There's some wonderful veteran-oriented handbooks and things. So we'll get that to you later. Okay, Ashley.
Okay, and we have one last question. Are there any services available to Navajo Nation veterans who are incarcerated in our prisons?
Not from the mission and not in Rock Point, but I have been involved as a chaplain, and we do try to follow up. If we have local people who end up incarcerated, we do try to follow up on them through the assistance of the institution itself, but also there's been times when I've visited down here, hospitals, jails, places where local people have found themselves.
Great. Well, I think that's our last question. Mike, I don't know if you have any closing things you'd like to say. We have our break that's actually starting right now before we get back to the general session. So if you have any last things, Mike, and then I can do a couple general information things.
Yeah, and if we had other questions that we didn't get to, feel free to email Kate, and they'll answer those for you. And I have mine in there too if you have questions about military or veteran ministries and things like that, my passion.
Right. Could I say one more thing, Mike? A little short, please. When it talks about that, you have as one of your criteria addressing the moral code issues. And that's really becomes a theological question when you're working with traditional Navajo cultural spirituality, because the Christian movement there has confused people about where God is, who God is, how God works in our lives. And so bridging that gap is a big piece of our ministry, so that we can speak truth to them and not all the many and various voices that have tried to evangelize the Navajo people. So we have to keep seeking the truth and having those one-on-one conversations with people.
Oh, thanks for bringing that up, Kate. That's one thing that impresses me. It isn't, a goal to convert, it's a goal to serve. And that's what St. Francis at the Franciscan Renewal Center, that's their culture also. So very comfortable working with you guys up there.
Yeah. Well, most faith-based pastors, they know what they know, and sometimes we have to step out of that box. I find myself stepping out of that box all the time to experience their expression of God rather than my language, my way of understanding. And I learn a great deal from them and find that there's a lot of unity.
Excellent, excellent. Good. Well, I see we're into the break session. But again, I just want to thank my friends, Kate and Parker, for being here today. And I hope, I thank you for signing in, and I hope you enjoy. Looking forward to the rest of the symposium. And thank you, Ashley. Chris, thanks for your technical help.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Mike. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I just want to let you know, I put in the link for a survey for the session. If you have a minute, please take that and give us feedback. And then also the link to get back to the general session that we have for our closing out for today. And thank you guys. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.